Rebecca told me I was dead to her on a Thursday in March, standing in the doorway of her kitchen while steam rose from a casserole dish behind her. The words came out clean and final, like she'd practiced them. My name is David Chen Morrison. I'm 32. I manage inventory for a medical supply company in Portland, and I keep my life organized in spreadsheets because chaos makes me anxious. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. The fight started over Thanksgiving plans. Rebecca had assumptions. I had boundaries. She wanted me to bring Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 years, to dinner but introduce him as my roommate. I wanted to bring him as what he was, the person I was planning to marry. "You're choosing him over family," she said, and her voice carried that particular edge she'd sharpened since Dad died, "over everything I raised you to believe." I stood in her living room, the same beige carpet I'd grown up walking on, and felt something shift. Not break. That had happened gradually over months of smaller conversations. This was more like a gear clicking into place. "I'm choosing honesty," I said. "Then choose it somewhere else." She walked to the front door and held it open. March air rushed in, carrying the smell of wet concrete and the neighbor's wood smoke. "Don't come back until you're ready to be the son I raised." That was 18 months ago. I drove home to my apartment on Burnside, called Marcus from the parking lot, and told him we'd be spending holidays with his family from now on. He didn't ask questions. He knew the shape of the silence I'd been carrying. Rebecca and I had exchanged exactly 4 text messages since then. Happy birthday in June. Happy birthday back in October. Merry Christmas. Thank you. Each one a small puncture in the quiet we'd built between us. I learned to shop for one person's groceries again. I stopped automatically buying the vanilla coffee creamer she likes. I removed her contact from my emergency medical forms and put Marcus instead. Small edits to a life I was rewriting without her voice in it. My sister Emma called sometimes, usually late at night when her kids were asleep and she had space to think. She'd update me on Rebecca's health, her job at the county clerk's office, the small renovation she was making to the house. Emma never took sides, but she carried messages neither of us had asked her to deliver. "She misses you," Emma would say. "She knows where to find me," I'd answer. "She's stubborn." "So am I." Emma would sigh then, the sound of someone who loved us both and couldn't fix either of us. She'd change the subject to her son's soccer season or her husband's promotion, safer territory where our family didn't split along lines we'd drawn in permanent ink. I built a routine without Rebecca in it. Sunday morning coffee with Marcus at the cafe on Division, grocery shopping at Trader Joe's instead of the Safeway near her house. Different routes to work that didn't pass the street where I grew up. I was good at creating distance. I had inherited that from her. The call came on a Tuesday in September while I was updating purchase orders for surgical gloves. My phone buzzed against my desk, and Emma's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail because I was in the middle of reconciling a shipment discrepancy, and I'd learned to return her calls when I had space to absorb whatever family news she was carrying. The second call came 3 minutes later. Then the third. I picked up on the fourth ring. "Emma, I'm at work." "David." Her voice was different, smaller. "I need you to sit down." I was already sitting, but I understood what she meant. I saved my spreadsheet and minimized the window. Outside my office, forklift engines hummed and pallets scraped across concrete floors. Normal sounds for a normal day that was about to crack open. "Mom's in the hospital," Emma said. "She collapsed at work yesterday. They've been running tests." My hand found the edge of my desk and gripped it. Collapsed? How? "Kidney failure. Advanced. The doctor said it's been building for months, maybe longer. She hadn't been feeling well, but didn't tell anyone. You know how she is." I did know. Rebecca treated illness like weakness, doctor visits like admissions of defeat. She'd powered through pneumonia when I was in high school, through a broken wrist when Emma was in middle school, through grief after Dad's heart attack when we both needed her to acknowledge that some things couldn't be managed with willpower alone. How advanced? I asked. Stage 4. They're talking about dialysis, but her best option is a transplant. Emma's voice caught. David, they want to test family members to see if anyone's a match. The words hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I could cross. Through my office window, I watched a delivery truck back up to the loading dock. The driver climbed out, checked his paperwork, and began unloading boxes marked with familiar medical supply logos. Everything looked exactly the same as it had 5 minutes ago, but something fundamental had shifted. "Where is she?" I asked. "OHSU, 4th floor, room 418. She's been asking for you." That stopped me cold. Asking for me? She won't say it directly, but she keeps looking at the door when people come in, like she's expecting someone who isn't there. I stared at my computer screen, at the purchase order numbers that suddenly seemed meaningless. "Does she know you called me?" "No. I thought you should hear it from me first before you decide." Decide? As if I had a choice about whether my mother lived or died. As if 18 months of silence had created enough scar tissue to insulate me from this. "I'll come." "David."
"I'll come to the hospital. Tonight. After work. But I'm not promising anything else." Emma was quiet for a long moment. "Okay. She's usually awake until 9 or 10. The nurses said visiting hours are flexible for the family." Family. The word felt strange in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd once been fluent in but hadn't practiced in years. I finished my workday in a haze of half-completed tasks and postponed decisions. Emailed my supervisor about needing time off, called Marcus, and explained in the clipped, factual tone I used when emotions were too large to fit into words. He offered to come with me. I said no, then changed my mind, then changed it back. The drive to OHSU took 43 minutes in evening traffic. I parked in the visitor garage and sat in my car for 10 minutes, listening to the engine tick as it cooled. The hospital rose above me in glass and concrete, windows lit yellow against the September dusk. Somewhere in that building, Rebecca was lying in a bed with tubes running into her arms, her body betraying her in ways her pride never would. I took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked past rooms filled with other people's emergencies. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and something sweeter I couldn't identify. My footsteps echoed off linoleum floors that had been mopped so many times they'd lost their original pattern. Room 418 was at the end of the corridor. The door was open, and I could see a slice of the interior. Part of a hospital bed, the edge of a chair, a window with blinds drawn against the darkness outside. I stood in the doorway for a full minute, listening to the electronic beeping of monitors and the distant sound of nurses talking at their station. Rebecca was asleep. Or pretending to be. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the hospital gown and the machinery surrounding her. Her hair, which she'd always kept perfectly styled, lay flat against the pillow. IV lines snaked from her arms to bags hanging from metal poles. A monitor displayed numbers I didn't understand, but somehow knew were important. I stepped into the room and closed the door softly behind me. The chair beside her bed was green vinyl, worn smooth by previous visitors. I sat down carefully, trying not to make noise. This close, I could see the changes 18 months had written on her face. New lines around her eyes, a grayness to her skin that had nothing to do with the fluorescent lighting. She opened her eyes while I was studying the monitor readings. For a moment, neither of us spoke. We looked at each other across the distance we'd created, across the words we'd said and the ones we'd left unspoken. "You came," she said finally. Her voice was hoarse, probably from the intubation they'd used during whatever procedures they'd run. "Emma called. I didn't ask her to." "I know." The monitor beeped steadily between us, marking time in a conversation neither of us knew how to have. Outside the window, Portland's lights stretched toward the mountains, the same view I'd grown up seeing from different angles around the city.
How long have you been sick? I asked. Couple months, maybe longer. Thought it was just tired, working too much. You should have seen a doctor sooner. Should have done a lot of things sooner. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I hadn't expected. Fear. David, I need to tell you something. You need a kidney, Emma told me.
That's not what I meant. She closed her eyes, and when she opened them again, they were wet. I meant I need to tell you I was wrong. About everything, about you, about Marcus, about what family means. The words hung in the air between us like a prayer neither of us knew how to answer. I felt something crack open in my chest, some wall I'd built brick by brick over 18 months of silence. Mom? Let me finish. Her voice was stronger now, more like the woman who'd raised me. I was scared. When you told me about Marcus, about who you really are, I was scared of losing the son I thought I knew. So I lost you anyway. I reached for her hand before I realized I was moving. Her skin was cooler than I remembered, dry from the hospital air and whatever medications they were giving her. You didn't lose me, I said. You told me to leave. Same thing. She squeezed my fingers weakly. I've been trying to figure out how to call you for months. Pride's a terrible thing, David. It makes you stupid when you can least afford to be. The monitor continued its electronic counting, marking the seconds we'd found our way back to each other. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, carrying someone else's emergency through the night. The doctors want to test me, I said, to see if I'm compatible. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. She cried then, quietly, the way she'd taught herself to cry after Dad died. I pulled tissues from the box on her bedside table and handed them to her. The same gesture I'd made countless times when I was younger, and she was the one comforting me. What if you're not a match? She asked. Then we'll figure out what comes next. What if you are? I thought about that. About surgery and recovery and the risk that came with giving up part of yourself to save someone else. About the 18 months we'd lost and the time we might have left. About Marcus waiting at home for me to call and tell him whether our lives were about to change completely. Then I guess we'll figure that out too. The transplant coordinator's office smelled like vanilla air freshener and antiseptic wipes. Dr. Sarah Martinez had the kind of calm competence that comes from delivering life-changing news to families every day. She spread Rebecca's medical files across her desk like tarot cards, each test result a piece of a puzzle I wasn't sure I wanted to complete. Kidney function at 12%, she said, pointing to a graph that looked like a ski slope heading straight down. Normal range is 90 to 120. Your mother's been in failure for at least 6 months, probably longer. I sat in the uncomfortable chair across from her desk, my hands folded in my lap the way Rebecca had taught me when I was 7 and waiting to see the principal. Marcus sat beside me, his presence steady and warm in a room full of clinical temperatures. What are her options without a transplant? Marcus asked. He'd been taking notes on his phone, creating the kind of organized document I would have made if my brain hadn't been stuck in emergency mode. Dialysis 3 times a week, indefinitely. It's exhausting. Quality of life deteriorates significantly. Most patients describe it as feeling like they're drowning slowly. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside the window, rain streaked the glass in thin lines that reminded me of the IV tubes connecting Rebecca to her machines upstairs. And with a transplant? I asked. Best case scenario, full recovery, normal lifespan. She could go back to work, travel, have energy again. But she needs a compatible donor. Dr. Martinez pulled out another folder, this one thicker. Family members are the best candidates. We'll need to test everyone willing to be screened. How long does testing take? For a full workup, 6 to 8 weeks. Blood work, imaging, psychological evaluation, surgical clearance. We're thorough because we're asking you to make a permanent decision about your body. Permanent. The word sat heavy in the room. I thought about my morning runs through Laurelhurst Park, the way my body felt strong and reliable under the October sky. I thought about the surgery scars Marcus carried from his appendectomy.
how he'd shown them to me on our second date, like credentials for surviving medical procedures. "What are the risks?" Marcus asked. "For living donors, very low, less than 0.5% chance of serious complications, but any surgery carries risk. Bleeding, infection, reaction to anesthesia. Long-term donors typically live normal, healthy lives with one kidney." She handed me a packet of papers thicker than a novel. "Take these home. Read everything. Discuss it with people you trust. This isn't a decision to rush." But Rebecca didn't have time for deliberation. Her creatinine levels were climbing daily. Dr. Martinez had explained it in terms I could understand. Imagine your body as a house and the kidneys as the plumbing. When the pipes back up, everything starts to flood. Emma was already in the hallway when we left the office, pacing in front of the elevators with a coffee cup she probably forgot she was holding. She'd driven up from Eugene the night before, left her kids with their father, taken emergency leave from her teaching job. Her eyes were red-rimmed with exhaustion. "How did it go?" she asked. "They want to test me, and you if you're willing." Emma nodded immediately. "Of course, whatever she needs." "Em, you have 2 kids. You can't—" "She's my mother too, David." Her voice carried the same stubborn edge that ran through our family, like a genetic trait. "I'm getting tested."
We rode the elevator to the 4th floor in silence. The afternoon shift had changed the energy of the ward. New nurses, different rhythms, the sound of dinner trays being distributed down the hallway. Rebecca was awake when we reached her room, propped up in bed with a cup of what appeared to be broth. "How was the meeting?" she asked. Her color was better than yesterday, or maybe that was wishful thinking. "They want to run tests," I said, "on me and Emma." "And me," Marcus added. Rebecca's eyes moved to him, and something passed across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of something she'd refused to see before. "You don't have to," she started. "Actually, I do." Marcus pulled a chair closer to her bed, the legs scraping against linoleum. "You're going to be my mother-in-law. David and I are getting married next spring. So this is family business." The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither had expected to find. Rebecca looked at Marcus for a long moment. Really looked. The way she used to study new recipes to memorize the ingredients. "You're getting married?" she repeated. "May 15th, at Powell Butte. Small ceremony. We sent you an invitation last month." "I got it." Her voice was quiet. "I wasn't sure if it was real or if you were just trying to hurt me. We were hoping you'd come." Rebecca set down her broth cup and reached for a tissue from the box beside her bed. I threw the invitation away. Then I dug it out of the trash at midnight and put it in my refrigerator. It's still there. Emma made a sound that might have been laughter or crying. "Mom, you're ridiculous." "I know." Rebecca looked at Marcus again. "What do you do for work?" "I'm a physical therapist at Providence, pediatric wing. I work with kids recovering from surgeries and injuries." "That's hard work." "It is, but rewarding. Kids heal faster than adults. They're braver too. David was brave as a child. Scared of everything, but brave anyway." Rebecca's eyes moved between Marcus and I. I should have remembered that when it mattered. Dr. Martinez had explained the testing process in clinical terms, but she hadn't prepared me for the emotional archaeology of medical screening. Each appointment unearthed pieces of my family history I'd never thought to question. Blood pressure patterns that traced back to my grandfather. Kidney function metrics that revealed how my body had been quietly excelling at jobs I'd never known it was performing. The psychological evaluation was scheduled for a Thursday morning at the end of October. Dr. Jennifer Walsh had an office in the medical complex across from the hospital, decorated with plants that looked too healthy for a room without windows. She asked questions that felt like gentle invasions. "What's your relationship with your mother like?" "Complicated. We didn't speak for 18 months before this." "Why?" I explained about the Thanksgiving fight, about coming out, about the way that Rebecca had chosen her discomfort over my honesty. Dr. Walsh took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting too small for me to read upside down. "How do you feel about donating a kidney to someone you've been estranged from?" "Like it's the right thing to do. Also, it's completely insane." "Those feelings can coexist," she said. "Do you feel pressured by family members?" "No." Emma said she'd support whatever I decided, Marcus too. "What about pressure from your mother?" I thought about that. She hasn't asked me directly, but she doesn't have to. I can see her dying a little bit every day. That's a heavy burden. So is letting someone die when you could save them. Dr. Martinez set down her pen and studied me with the intensity of someone trained to recognize self-deception. David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you doing this to save your mother's life or to save your relationship with her? The question hit like cold water. I sat in her comfortable chair, surrounded by her healthy plants, and realized I'd been carrying both motivations without examining either one clearly. I don't know, I said finally. That's an honest answer. Let's explore it. We talked for another 40 minutes about guilt and obligation, about the difference between generosity and self-sacrifice. She explained that some donors experienced regret after surgery, especially when the operation didn't repair damaged relationships the way they'd hoped. A kidney transplant can save someone's life, she said as our session ended, but it can't undo years of hurt or change fundamental incompatibilities between people. I know that. Do you? Because families often put enormous pressure on donors to fix more than medical problems. I left her office with homework assignments that felt like riddles. Write a letter to yourself explaining why you want to donate. List 3 ways your life might change after surgery.
Describe your worst-case scenario and your best-case scenario. The questions followed me home, sitting passenger side in my car while I navigated afternoon traffic. Marcus was cooking when I got back to our apartment, filling our kitchen with the smell of garlic and olive oil. He'd learned to read my moods in the 3 years we'd been together, and he gave me space to hang up my jacket and wash my hands before asking about the appointment. How was the therapist? Thorough. She asked if I'm doing this for the right reasons. Are you? I kissed him instead of answering, tasting the tomato sauce he'd been testing for seasoning. What would you do if it was your mom? My mom would never put me in this position. She'd rather die than ask me to risk surgery for her. That's not an answer. Marcus turned down the heat under his saucepan and faced me fully. Honestly, I'd probably do exactly what you're doing, even knowing it might not fix anything between us. Why? Because living with the guilt of saying no would be worse than living with one kidney. The blood work results came back on a Friday afternoon. Dr. Martinez called while I was reviewing inventory reports, her voice professionally neutral in a way that made my stomach clench. Good news, she said. You're a preliminary match. We'll need to do more detailed testing, but your blood type and initial antibody screens look compatible. I set down my pen and stared at the numbers on my computer screen without seeing them. What does that mean? It means there's a very good chance you could be Rebecca's donor. The next phase of testing will take 2 weeks. Imaging studies, heart function, kidney function, surgical clearance. If everything looks good, we could schedule the surgery for late November. Late November. 6 weeks away. I thanked her and hung up, then sat in my office chair staring at nothing while the implications settled around me like dust after an explosion. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Test results? Good match. More testing needed. Holy shit, David. Are you okay? I wasn't sure. I felt hollowed out and overfull simultaneously, like my body was processing emotions it didn't have names for. Through my office window, I could see delivery trucks lined up at the loading dock, drivers checking schedules and signatures, everything proceeding according to predictable patterns, while my life reorganized itself around medical procedures I'd never imagined having. I need to tell Rebecca, I texted Emma. Want me to come with you? No. This one's mine. I left work early and drove to OHSU through rush hour traffic that seemed designed to give me time to second-guess every decision I'd made in the past month. The hospital parking garage was fuller than usual, families arriving for evening visits and night shift employees clocking in. I found a space on the 5th level and sat in my car for 10 minutes, watching people walk past with flowers and get well balloons. Rebecca was reading when I reached her room, glasses perched on her nose and a paperback romance novel open in her lap. She looked up when I knocked on the doorframe,
and I saw hope and fear compete across her face. "Dr. Martinez called you?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm a match. Preliminary, anyway. They want to do more tests." She closed her book carefully, marking her place with a hospital admission bracelet she had been using as a bookmark. "David, I need to say something before we go any further. Okay? I can't let you do this to fix what's broken between us. A kidney won't make me a better mother. It won't change the fact that I chose fear over love when it mattered most." I sat down in the chair I'd claimed as mine over the past weeks. "I'm not doing this to fix us, Mom. I'm doing it because you need to live." "Why?" The question was simple and impossible. I thought about Dr. Walsh's homework assignments, about the letters I'd started writing to myself and never finished, about the difference between obligation and choice, between saving someone and saving yourself. Because Emma's kids need their grandmother, because you haven't met your future son-in-law properly yet, because there are conversations we still need to have and apologies we both need to make. I paused, searching for words that felt true instead of noble. Because 18 months of silence doesn't erase 32 years of being your son. Rebecca cried then. The quiet tears I'd learned to recognize as her truest emotion. I handed her tissues and waited while she composed herself. The same patience I'd learned from watching her comfort other people when I was growing up. "What if something goes wrong?" she asked. "Then we'll deal with it. What if the surgery works but we still can't fix this?" She gestured between us, indicating the invisible damage we'd accumulated. "Then at least you'll be alive to keep trying." Outside her window, Portland's lights were beginning to flicker against the November dusk. The monitor beside her bed continued its electronic counting, marking time we'd reclaimed from the silence and time we might have left to figure out who we could become together. The advanced testing took place over 3 days in November, each appointment stripping away another layer of privacy until my body felt like a book everyone had read except me. The CT scan required fasting for 12 hours and drinking contrast dye that tasted like chalky metal. The technician, a woman named Linda, with graying curls, positioned me on the table with the careful efficiency of someone who'd guided thousands of bodies through these machines.
"Hold your breath when I tell you," she said through the intercom. "We need clear images of both kidneys." The scanner hummed around me, a mechanical whale song that echoed off the walls of the narrow tube. I closed my eyes and thought about the images being captured. Cross-sections of my organs, detailed maps of blood vessels and tissue density. Somewhere in those pictures, doctors would find the story of whether I could save Rebecca's life. Dr. Patricia Wong, the transplant surgeon, reviewed my results in her office the following Tuesday. She had the kind of precise movements that come from spending decades making millimeter-perfect incisions, each gesture economical and deliberate. My films were clipped to a light board that made my insides glow like stained glass windows. "Beautiful kidneys," she said, pointing to 2 bean-shaped shadows on the screen. "Size, position, vascular structure, everything looks excellent. Your left kidney has a single renal artery, which makes it ideal for transplantation." "What happens to me after surgery?" "You'll be in the hospital for 3 to 4 days, recovery at home for 6 weeks, no heavy lifting, no contact sports for 3 months. After that, normal life. Your remaining kidney will compensate fully." She showed me pictures from previous surgeries, before and after photos that looked like puzzle pieces being rearranged. The donor scars were smaller than I'd expected. 4 small circles where the laparoscopic instruments entered, 1 longer line where the kidney emerged. Questions? I had dozens, but they all seemed to reduce to one fundamental uncertainty. How do you know this will work? We don't, completely, but your mother's rejection markers are low, your tissue compatibility is excellent, and she's young enough to handle the surgery well. Success rate for living donor transplants is 95% in 1 year. 95%. The number felt both reassuring and inadequate. I thought about the 5% who didn't make it, whose families gathered in different rooms to have different conversations. When could we schedule it? December 15th, assuming your final clearances come through. December 15th, 3 weeks before my 33rd birthday. I'd be giving Rebecca a piece of myself as an early Christmas present, wrapped in surgical gauze and delivered under general anesthesia. Emma's testing didn't go as smoothly. She called me from the hospital parking lot after her consultation, her voice tight with disappointment and relief. Blood pressure's too high. Dr. Martinez thinks it's pregnancy-related, still elevated from when I had Caleb. They can't clear me for surgery. How do you feel about that? Guilty? Grateful? Terrified that now it all depends on you. She paused, and I could hear her car engine idling. David, what if you change your mind? I won't. But what if you do? What if you wake up tomorrow and decide this is insane? I understood her fear. We'd grown up with Rebecca's conditional love, learned to navigate her approval like a minefield where the rules changed without warning. The thought of disappointing her again, even for legitimate reasons, carried weight that had nothing to do with kidney function. Then she'd understand, I said. She'd have to. Would she, though? That question followed me through the next 2 weeks like a shadow I couldn't shake. Rebecca's condition was deteriorating faster than expected. Her dialysis sessions left her exhausted and nauseated, barely able to stay awake for visiting hours. The robust woman who had raised me was disappearing inside a body that couldn't keep up with basic maintenance. Marcus started sleeping badly, jerking awake at night to check that I was breathing normally beside me. During the day, he'd catch me staring at nothing and ask what I was thinking about. The honest answer was that I was rehearsing surgical scenarios, imagining the moment when anesthesia would pull me under and strangers would cut me open to harvest parts of myself. "Are you scared?" he asked one evening while we were cooking dinner together. Terrified. But not the surgery. What then? I considered how to explain the fear that lived deeper than physical risk. What if I give her my kidney and she still can't love me the way I am? What if I'm not enough to save her, medically or otherwise? Marcus set down his knife and turned to face me completely. Then you'll have done something brave and generous for someone who needed it. The rest isn't your responsibility. It feels like it is. That's because you're a good son, even when she wasn't a good mother. The pre-surgical appointment was scheduled for December 10th, 5 days before the operation. Rebecca had been moved to a private room on the transplant ward, a space designed for families navigating these decisions. The walls were painted in soothing blues and grays, with photographs of mountains and forests that were probably meant to evoke healing and renewal. Rebecca was sitting up in bed when I arrived, her color better than it had been in weeks. The prospect of surgery had given her something I hadn't seen since before Dad died. Hope that looked forward instead of backward. "How do you feel?" I sat down in the chair that had become mine over the past months, like I'm about to jump out of an airplane without knowing if my parachute works. "David, I need to tell you something about why I reacted the way I did when you came out. I'd been waiting for this conversation for 18 months, but now that it was here, I wasn't sure I wanted to hear her explanation. Some hurts feel safer when they remain mysterious. You don't have to." "Yes, I do. Before you give me part of yourself, you need to understand what kind of person you're saving." She adjusted her blanket with the careful movements of someone whose body had become unpredictable. "When your father and I got married, I was pregnant with a baby we lost at 4 months, a little girl. The doctors couldn't explain why. This was new information, a piece of family history I'd never heard. Mom, I'm sorry. We tried for 3 years to have another baby. Nothing. The doctors said there was no medical reason, but my body just wouldn't cooperate. I started to believe God was punishing me for something." Rebecca's voice carried the weight of old grief, carefully preserved and rarely examined. When Emma was born, and then you, I was so grateful, but also terrified. Like, maybe I'd used up all my chances for happiness. What does that have to do with me being gay? When you told me about Marcus, about planning to marry him, all I could think was that I was losing you too, that somehow I'd failed as a mother and this was my punishment. She looked directly at me for the first time since starting her story. I know that's not how sexuality works. I know you didn't choose to be gay any more than I chose to miscarry. But fear doesn't follow logic. The monitor beside her bed continued its electronic counting, marking the seconds we spent in territory neither of us had mapped before. Outside, December rain streaked the windows in patterns that reminded me of the IV lines she'd worn for so many weeks. I was terrified of losing you, so I drove you away first. That's what scared people do. They destroy what they love before it can leave them. You didn't lose me. I did, though, for 18 months, and I would have lost you permanently if I hadn't gotten sick. Her laugh was bitter. Kidney failure was the best thing that happened to me. How messed up is that? I reached for her hand, finding skin that was warm but somehow fragile, like paper that had been folded too many times. You're not losing me now. What if the surgery doesn't work? Then we'll figure out what comes next. What if it does work, but I can't change? What if I'm too old and too stubborn to become the mother you deserve? That was the question I'd been avoiding, the possibility that lived underneath all my other fears. Then at least you'll be alive to keep trying. The night before surgery, Marcus and I went to dinner at our favorite restaurant in the Pearl District. The place was decorated for Christmas with white lights and evergreen branches, couples leaning across candlelit tables to share conversations I couldn't hear. We ordered wine and appetizers, pretending this was an ordinary evening instead of the last night I'd spend with 2 functioning kidneys. Any regrets? Marcus asked. Ask me in a week. I'm proud of you for doing this, for being brave enough to risk everything for someone who hurt you. It doesn't feel brave. It feels like the only choice I could live with. After dinner, we walked through downtown Portland in the cold December air, past store windows filled with holiday displays and sidewalks crowded with people finishing their Christmas shopping. Everything looked normal and foreign simultaneously, like I was seeing the world through glass that had been subtly distorted. At home, I took a shower with the antibacterial soap the hospital had given me, scrubbing my skin until it felt raw and purified. I laid out clothes for the morning, comfortable things that would be easy to put on after surgery. Marcus helped me change the sheets on our bed, both of us moving with the careful attention to detail that comes before important events. What if something goes wrong? I asked as we turned off the lights. Nothing will go wrong. But what if it does? Then I'll be right there when you wake up, and we'll figure out what comes next together. I dreamed about swimming in a lake that had no bottom, my body cutting through water that grew colder and darker the deeper I went. When I woke up, it was still dark outside, and Marcus was already making coffee in the kitchen. Surgery was scheduled for 7 in the morning. The drive to OHSU was quiet except for NPR murmuring from the radio. Marcus held my hand while he drove, his thumb tracing circles on my palm the way he did when he was nervous. The hospital parking garage was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to night shift workers and early morning patients. Rebecca was already in pre-op when I arrived, wearing a surgical gown and compression stockings that made her legs look small and vulnerable. Emma was sitting beside her bed, still in the clothes she'd driven up from Eugene in, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had come loose during the night. "How are you feeling?" Rebecca asked when she saw me. "Like I'm about to jump out of an airplane without knowing if my parachute works." "You can still change your mind, right up until they put you under." I looked at her lying in the hospital bed. My mother who had shaped me and wounded me and was about to receive a piece of my body that would keep her alive. I'm not changing my mind.
Dr. Wong appeared in scrubs that were still crisp from the laundry, her hair covered by a surgical cap decorated with tiny snowflakes. Ready? I kissed Marcus goodbye, hugged Emma, and squeezed Rebecca's hand one more time. Then I followed Dr. Wong down a hallway that led to operating rooms where strangers would spend the next 4 hours rearranging our insides, according to plans they'd memorized from medical textbooks. The last thing I remembered was the anesthesiologist asking me to count backward from 10. I made it to 7 before everything went black. Consciousness returned in fragments. First, the sound of machines beeping in steady rhythms, then the taste of something metallic coating my tongue, the weight of blankets across legs that felt disconnected from my brain. Pain bloomed across my left side like a flower opening in slow motion, radiating from incisions I couldn't see yet. A voice I didn't recognize was saying my name. David? Can you hear me? You're in recovery. Surgery went perfectly. I tried to open my eyes, but the lids felt heavy as sandbags. When I finally managed it, fluorescent light stabbed through my pupils like needles. A nurse with kind eyes and purple scrubs leaned over me, checking monitors that chirped and hummed around my bed. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," I managed to croak. "That's normal. Dr. Wong will be in to see you soon. Your kidney is already making urine in your mother." My kidney? Rebecca? The concept felt surreal, like science fiction happening inside my own family. A piece of me was now keeping her alive, filtering her blood, performing the job her own organs could no longer handle. Is she okay? She's doing beautifully. Her numbers are already improving. We'll move you both to the transplant ward in a few hours. The next several hours passed in a haze of morphine and ice chips. Marcus appeared beside my bed at some point, his hair messed up and his eyes red from crying or exhaustion or both. He held my hand carefully, avoiding the IV lines that snaked from my wrists to bags hanging above me. "How long was I out?" I asked. 4.5 hours. They said everything went exactly according to plan. He squeezed my fingers gently. "You scared the hell out of me." "Sorry." "Don't apologize for saving someone's life." Dr. Wong visited that afternoon, still in scrubs, but with her surgical cap replaced by normal hair that was graying at the temples. She checked my incisions with the focused attention of an artist examining her work. Pain level 1 to 10. 6, maybe 7 when I breathe deep. That's excellent for day 1. Your kidneys started functioning immediately in Rebecca. Her creatinine dropped 30% in the first 6 hours. Can I see her? Tomorrow, when you're both more stable. Today, rest. Let your body focus on healing. The transplant ward felt different from the rest of the hospital. Quieter, somehow more hopeful. Nurses moved with the competence of people accustomed to witnessing medical miracles. My room had a window that looked out over the Willamette River, where December fog hung low over the water like exhaled breath. Emma brought flowers the next morning. White lilies that smelled like spring in the middle of winter. She'd been crying, I could tell from the puffiness around her eyes and the way she kept fidgeting with her wedding ring. "How's Mom?" I asked. "Amazing, like scary amazing. She's been awake since 5 this morning asking when she can see you. The nurses finally told her to take a nap or they'd sedate her." "And how are you?" Emma sat down in the chair beside my bed, the same green vinyl model that seemed to populate every room in the hospital. "Relieved, guilty that I couldn't be the donor, grateful that you could. It's complicated. Family usually is. David, there's something I need to tell you. About Mom. About why she really reacted the way she did when you came out." I adjusted my position in the bed, wincing as the movement pulled at my incisions. "She already told me. About the miscarriage, about being afraid of losing me. That's part of it. But there's more." Emma looked out the window, watching fog drift between the buildings downtown. "Dad knew about you and Marcus before you told them. He'd seen you two together at a restaurant downtown. Figured it out." This was news that rearranged everything I thought I understood about my family's dynamics. "Dad knew?" He was trying to convince Mom to let you tell them when you were ready. They had fights about it for weeks. She wanted to confront you directly, force you to either deny it or confirm it. Dad said that would just drive you away. Why didn't she listen to him? Because she was scared. And when Mom gets scared, she gets controlling. You know how she is.
I did know. Rebecca had managed our household like a military operation when we were kids, every detail planned and executed according to her specifications. She'd approached parenting the same way, with clear expectations and predetermined outcomes that didn't always account for who her children actually were. The night before Dad died, Emma continued, he made her promise to accept whatever you told them about your life. He said, loving you meant loving all of you, not just the parts that made sense to them. So what happened? He died before you came out to them, and Mom was so angry at God, at the doctors, at the unfairness of everything, that she couldn't keep the promise. When you finally told her about Marcus, all that grief and anger came out as rejection. The machines around my bed continued their electronic monitoring, counting heartbeats and oxygen levels, while I processed this new version of family history. Outside, rain began pattering against the window, the kind of gentle December precipitation that would turn to snow in the mountains. She's been carrying that guilt for 18 months, Emma said, breaking Dad's promise, losing you, feeling like she had failed at the most important job he'd given her. Why are you telling me this now? Because you deserve to understand what you're forgiving. It wasn't just prejudice or stubbornness, it was grief that got pointed in the wrong direction. Dr. Wong cleared me to visit Rebecca that afternoon. An orderly wheeled me down the hallway in a wheelchair, my IV pole rolling beside us like a metal companion. Rebecca's room was 3 doors down from mine, close enough that we'd been breathing the same recycled air while our bodies learned to function with rearranged organs. She was sitting up in bed when I arrived, looking more alert than I'd seen her in months. The grayish pallor that had marked her illness was already fading, replaced by something that looked like actual health. Her eyes followed me as the orderly positioned my wheelchair beside her bed. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Like I donated a kidney. How do you feel?" "Like I got a new lease on life." She paused, studying my face with the intensity she'd once reserved for checking homework or monitoring fevers. "David, I can never repay this." "I'm not asking you to." "I know. That's what makes it so extraordinary." She reached for my hand, her grip stronger than it had been in weeks. "Your kidney started working immediately. They said that's unusual. Most transplanted organs take time to adjust. Maybe it recognizes the neighborhood." Rebecca laughed, a sound I hadn't heard since before Dad died. "Dr. Wong said I could be discharged by Christmas, home for the holidays." "That's good news." "David, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Do you regret this? Now that it's done and you're in pain and stuck in a hospital bed?" I considered the question seriously. My body ached in ways I hadn't known were possible. The incisions across my abdomen felt like lightning strikes that had been frozen in place. Every breath reminded me that something fundamental had changed in my internal architecture. "No," I said. "I don't regret it. Even knowing that I might never become the mother you deserve, that I might be too old and too damaged to change. You're already changing. I can see it." "How?" "You're asking different questions. Before, you would have told me how I should feel instead of asking how I actually feel." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, processing this observation. "Your father would have been proud of you for doing this, for being brave enough to love someone who'd hurt you. He would have been proud of you, too, for keeping his promise, eventually." Emma told you. She thought I should understand what I was forgiving. And do you understand? I looked at my mother lying in her hospital bed, my kidney already working inside her body to clean her blood and regulate her fluid balance. She looked smaller than the woman who'd raised me, diminished my illness and regret, but also somehow more real, less performative, more authentic. "I understand that you were scared. I understand that grief made you cruel. I understand that fear can make people destroy what they love most. I paused, searching for words that felt true instead of kind. I also understand that understanding isn't the same as excusing. What do you need from me to move forward? Time, effort, proof that you mean what you're saying now. And if I can't change enough, if I disappoint you again, then at least you'll be alive to disappoint me. That's more than we had 3 months ago. Marcus arrived that evening with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant, sneaking it past the nurses who insisted I should stick to clear liquids for another day. We ate pad Thai from plastic containers while snow began falling outside my window, the first real snowfall of the season. "How was your mother?" he asked. "Different? Maybe better. It's hard to tell yet." "Are you okay with being different?" I thought about that while I picked through rice noodles that tasted like normal life. I'm okay with the possibility of being different. Whether it sticks is up to her.
And if it doesn't, then I'll know I tried. That'll have to be enough. The next few days passed in a routine of physical therapy and medication schedules. I learned to walk while dragging an IV pole, to shower with plastic covering my incisions, to sleep sitting up because lying flat pulled too much at the healing tissue. Rebecca and I visited each other daily. Awkward conversations that felt like diplomatic negotiations between countries that had recently ended a war. She told me about her work at the county clerk's office, about coworkers who'd sent flowers, and friends who'd promised to visit. I told her about my job at the medical supply company, about inventory systems and shipping schedules that suddenly seemed important again now that I was planning to return to them. We avoided the big topics: my wedding, her prejudices, the 18 months of silence we'd built between us. Instead, we practiced being family members who could occupy the same space without causing each other pain. It was a start. On December 20th, Dr. Wong discharged us both with prescriptions for pain medication and strict instructions about follow-up appointments. Marcus helped me pack the few belongings I'd accumulated during my hospital stay: books I'd been too medicated to read, toiletries that smelled like institutional soap, get-well cards from coworkers who barely knew me but understood the significance of giving organs to family members. Rebecca was signing her own discharge papers when we stopped by her room to say goodbye. She looked up from the clipboard, pen poised over signature lines that would release her back into a world where her kidneys worked properly. "David," she said, "I want you to know something. Whatever happens between us, whatever I fail to become or succeed at changing, this gift you've given me, it's the most generous thing anyone has ever done for me." "Mom, let me finish. I know I don't deserve it. I know I haven't earned forgiveness, but you gave it anyway, and that tells me more about who you are than 18 months of anger ever could." She stood up carefully, still moving with the cautious precision of someone whose body had recently been rearranged by surgery. "I love you. The real you, not the version I tried to force you to be. I should have said that 18 months ago, but I'm saying it now." I hugged her then, carefully avoiding pressure on either of our healing incisions. She felt fragile in my arms, but also stronger than she had in months. My kidney was working inside her, keeping her alive, giving us both time to figure out what came next. "I love you too. We'll figure out the rest as we go." Outside, snow continued falling on Portland, covering the hospital parking lot in white that made everything look clean and new. Marcus helped me into the passenger seat of our car, adjusting my seatbelt to avoid pressure on my incisions. As we drove home through streets I'd navigated thousands of times before, everything looked familiar and different simultaneously. At the next stoplight, I pulled out my phone and opened the family group chat that had been quiet since the surgery. I typed carefully, using the same deliberate precision I'd learned for managing inventory spreadsheets. "New rule. We don't get to stop loving each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." I hit send before I could second-guess myself.
The notification disappeared into the digital space where our family tried to communicate across distances we'd created and bridges we were still learning to build. Emma responded first, a heart emoji and the words, "My dad would be proud." Rebecca's response came 2 minutes later. "I'm proud too, of all of us." The light turned green and Marcus drove us home through snow that kept falling, covering our tracks and giving us fresh ground to walk on. 3 months after surgery, Rebecca showed up at my apartment with a casserole dish and an expression I'd never seen before. It was February, one of those Portland days when the sun breaks through winter clouds like a promise that spring might actually exist. I was working from home, catching up on inventory reports, while my body finished healing from procedures that had rearranged both our lives. The knock came just after lunch, 3 short raps that sounded tentative. I opened the door expecting a delivery driver, but found my mother instead, standing in the hallway with homemade lasagna and what appeared to be carefully rehearsed courage. "I should have called first," she said. "Probably, but you're here now." She looked different. Healthier, obviously. The transplanted kidney had restored color to her face and energy to her movements. But there was something else, a softness around her edges that hadn't been there before. She was wearing jeans instead of her usual pressed slacks, sneakers instead of sensible pumps. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside, and she entered our apartment Marcus and I had spent 3 years turning into home. She'd never been here before. During our estrangement, this space had existed as a sanctuary she couldn't contaminate with disapproval. Now she stood in our living room, taking in details that revealed who we actually were when she wasn't watching. Books stacked on every surface, Marcus's physical therapy equipment in the corner, wedding planning magazines scattered across the coffee table, 2 coffee mugs in the sink, evidence of the domestic routine we'd built without her input or approval. "Nice place," she said, and seemed to mean it. "Thanks. Marcus picked most of the furniture. He has better taste than I do." "Where is he?" "Work. He'll be home around 6. Rebecca nodded, still holding the lasagna like armor. "I made this for you, both of you. It's his recipe, the one from your engagement party that I never came to." The engagement party. Marcus's coworkers had thrown it for us last spring, a potluck barbecue in Laurelhurst Park where people brought dishes and children and genuine happiness for our relationship. Rebecca was invited. She'd RSVP'd no without explanation.
How did you get the recipe? I called his mother, Jennifer. We had a long conversation. This was news that reorganized everything I thought I understood about my mother's capacity for change. Jennifer lived in Salem, worked as a high school guidance counselor, and had been nothing but welcoming when Marcus introduced us 2 years ago. The idea of Rebecca reaching out to her felt like watching tectonic plates shift. "What did you talk about?" "Wedding planning, mostly. She told me about the venue you've chosen, about the flowers and the menu and the photographer." Rebecca set the lasagna down on my kitchen counter, her movements careful and deliberate. "She also told me I was an idiot for missing your engagement party." "She said that?" "Her exact words were that you were lucky to have found someone who loved you so completely and that I was missing out on knowing the kind of man who could inspire that love." I leaned against the kitchen door frame, watching my mother navigate space that had been forbidden to her for so long. What else did she say? That forgiveness isn't something you earn, it's something you practice, every day in small ways until it becomes natural instead of forced. Rebecca opened my refrigerator to make room for the lasagna, scanning shelves that contained evidence of the life I'd built without her. Specialty cheese from the farmer's market, Marcus's protein shakes, leftover takeout from restaurants she'd never heard of. "I've been practicing," she said, "forgiveness, acceptance, shutting up when my first instinct is to give advice nobody asked for." "How's that going?" "Harder than I expected. Easier than I feared." She closed the refrigerator and turned to face me fully. "David, I need to ask you something important." "Okay. Will you let me help with your wedding?"
The question hung between us like a bridge I wasn't sure could support the weight of our history. For months, Marcus and I had been planning our May 15th ceremony without Rebecca's input, designing a celebration that would reflect our values instead of accommodating her prejudices. What kind of help? Whatever you'll let me contribute. Flowers, decorations, photography. I have money saved from not taking that European cruise I'd planned for my retirement. Mom, you don't have to. I want to. Not because I feel guilty, though I do, because I want to be part of building something beautiful instead of tearing it down. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her purse, smoothing it against my kitchen counter. I've been making lists, ideas for centerpieces, contact information for caterers, timelines for everything that needs to happen between now and May 15th. The paper was covered in Rebecca's precise handwriting, the same careful script she'd used for grocery lists and permission slips when I was growing up. But instead of organizing household logistics, she was planning a same-sex wedding with the methodical attention she usually reserved for projects she cared deeply about. You made lists, I said. I make lists for things that matter to me. I scanned her notes, recognizing the obsessive thoroughness that had characterized her approach to every major event in our family's history. Birthday parties planned with military precision, holiday meals orchestrated down to the timing of side dishes. She had approached parenting the same way, with detailed expectations and predetermined outcomes. This is very thorough, I said. I had time to think while I was recovering about the kind of mother I wanted to be versus the kind I actually was, about the wedding I'd always imagined giving you versus the one you actually want. What's the difference? Rebecca was quiet for a moment, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. The wedding I imagined was about what other people would think, traditional, conventional, designed to prove that I'd raised you correctly. The wedding you're planning is about love. Yours and Marcus's. That's more important than anything I was worried about. It took you a while to figure that out. Some of us are slow learners, but kidney failure is excellent motivation for reevaluating priorities. I looked at my mother standing in my kitchen, holding wedding plans she'd made for a ceremony she'd spent 18 months rejecting. The woman who told me I was dead to her was now researching LGBTQ-friendly vendors and making notes about rainbow theme options. There's something I need to tell you, I said, about the wedding, about why we chose May 15th. I assumed it was just a nice time of year. It's Dad's birthday. Rebecca's face went very still. Outside, rain began pattering against the windows. The kind of steady February precipitation that turns Portland into a city of umbrellas and coffee shops. You chose your father's birthday. We wanted him there somehow. He would have loved Marcus. He would have been excited about the wedding, about us being happy. Yes, she said quietly, he would have. Are you okay with that? Getting married on his birthday?
Rebecca was crying now. Tears that looked different from the ones I'd seen during her illness. These were softer, more complicated. David, he would have been so proud to have his birthday become a celebration of love instead of just grief. You think so? I know so. He always said the best gift anyone could give him was proof that his children were happy. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Getting married on his birthday isn't just including him, it's honoring everything he wanted for you. Marcus came home to find us sitting at the kitchen table with Rebecca's wedding lists spread between us like peace treaties, written in careful handwriting. He stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene with the cautious optimism of someone who'd watched our family navigate explosive territory for months. "Rebecca," he said, "this is a surprise." "I hope it's a good one. I brought lasagna and wedding planning services, if you'll have them." Marcus looked at me, a question in his eyes. I nodded slightly, and some tension I hadn't realized he was carrying seemed to drain from his shoulders. "We'd love to help with the wedding," he said. "We're drowning in details." "I'm good with details. I remember, you once made a spreadsheet for my 8th birthday party."
That party was flawless. It was terrifying. I was afraid to spill anything on the tablecloth. Different standards for different times, Rebecca said. This wedding will be about joy, not perfection. We spent the next 2 hours going through vendor lists and timeline spreadsheets, Rebecca asking questions about our vision instead of imposing her own. She took notes when Marcus explained our preference for simple flowers over elaborate arrangements. She nodded thoughtfully when I described wanting casual elegance instead of formal tradition. "What about music?" she asked. "We haven't figured that out yet," Marcus said. "We want something personal, but not cheesy." "Your father played guitar," Rebecca said to me. "Not well, but enthusiastically. He wrote a song for our wedding. Terrible lyrics, sweet melody." I didn't know that. There's a lot you don't know about him, about us. Maybe it's time I started sharing some of those stories. As evening approached and Marcus started preparing dinner, Rebecca gathered her lists and prepared to leave. She hugged us both goodbye, careful embraces that felt like apologies and promises simultaneously. Same time next week, I found 3 photographers who specialize in outdoor ceremonies and a caterer who does excellent work with dietary restrictions. Same time next week, I agreed. After she left, Marcus and I reheated the lasagna she'd brought. It was excellent, rich and perfectly seasoned, the kind of comfort food that takes hours to prepare properly. How do you feel about this, her being involved in the wedding? I considered the question while I ate food my mother had made from his family's recipe, prepared in her kitchen with the intention of building bridges instead of walls. "Cautiously optimistic," I said. "She's trying, really trying. And if she reverts to old patterns, if the stress of wedding planning brings out her controlling side, then we'll set boundaries." But Marcus, did you see those lists? She researched LGBTQ-friendly vendors. She called your mother. 6 months ago, she wouldn't even say your name. People can change. Some people. Under the right circumstances, with enough motivation. Marcus reached across the table and took my hand, his thumb tracing the scar on my wrist where the IV had been during surgery. Getting a kidney from your son is pretty good motivation. It's not just the kidney, it's everything that came with it. The forgiveness, the second chance, the proof that love can survive almost anything if you're willing to work for it. That night, I called Emma to update her on Rebecca's visit. She listened while I described the wedding lists and the conversation about Dad's birthday, the way our mother had navigated our apartment like a tourist, learning new customs. She's been different since the surgery. Not just healthier, more honest. Like she used up all her energy on pretending and doesn't have any left for maintaining facades. Think it'll last? I think she's scared enough of losing you again to keep working at it. Fear can be destructive, but it can be motivating. And if it's not enough, if she can't sustain this level of change, then at least you'll know you gave her every opportunity. That'll have to be enough. After I hung up, I found Marcus in our bedroom, folding laundry with the methodical precision he brought to physical therapy sessions. He looked up when I entered, his expression curious and calm. "Penny for your thoughts," he said. "I was thinking about forgiveness, about how it's not a destination you reach, but a practice you maintain." Very philosophical. Rebecca said something similar today, about practicing forgiveness until it becomes natural instead of forced.
Marcus set down the shirt he'd been folding and gave me his full attention. "How does it feel, practicing forgiveness with someone who hurt you so deeply?" I thought about that while rain continued pattering against our windows, the sound of a Portland winter giving way slowly to spring. Like physical therapy. Painful at first, then gradually easier. Some days are better than others, but I'm definitely getting stronger. I can work with that analogy. I figured you could. He kissed me then, soft and familiar, the kind of kiss that felt like coming home after a long journey through unfamiliar territory. Outside, the city settled into evening routines, while our family continued the complicated work of learning to love each other properly. 3 weeks later, Rebecca called with an update on wedding vendors. She'd found a photographer who specialized in intimate outdoor ceremonies, a florist who could create simple arrangements that wouldn't compete with the natural beauty of Powell Butte, and a string quartet willing to learn Dad's wedding song from the cassette recording she'd discovered in their old storage boxes. The song might need some updating, she warned. Your father was not a natural lyricist. We'll work with what we have, I said. That seems to be our family motto these days. She was right. We were all working with what we had. Damaged relationships and good intentions, inherited trauma and hard-won wisdom. The complicated love that survives when people decide it's worth the effort to keep trying. The kidney I'd given her was functioning perfectly, her latest test results showing numbers that would make any transplant surgeon proud. But more than that, she was functioning differently too, making different choices, asking different questions, approaching our relationship with the kind of care usually reserved for valuable things that have been broken and painstakingly repaired. May 15th was still 3 months away, but already I could see how our wedding day would unfold. Not the formal, traditional ceremony Rebecca had once imagined, but something that honored both our authentic selves and the family we're still learning to become. A celebration built on love instead of obligation, joy instead of performance. It wouldn't be perfect, none of us were perfect, but it would be real and honest and ours. That felt like enough. The dress fitting appointment was Rebecca's idea. She'd mentioned it casually during one of our weekly wedding planning sessions, suggesting that Emma might want something new for the ceremony. What she didn't mention was that she'd already made appointments for all 3 of us at a boutique in the Pearl District. She said, I thought we could make it a family outing. When Emma and I arrived at the shop on a Saturday morning in April, mother of the groom, sister of the groom, and groom shopping together. The boutique was the kind of place that intimidated me under normal circumstances. All mirrors and soft lighting and salespeople who looked like they'd stepped out of fashion magazines. Rebecca moved through it with confidence I'd never seen her display in clothing stores before. She said, I've been researching appropriate attire for outdoor gay weddings. We need something elegant but practical. Comfortable shoes for walking on grass, colors that photograph well against natural backgrounds. The young man, probably my age, with perfectly styled hair and geometric glasses, brightened immediately. You've done your homework. I'm Tyler. Let's find you some fabulous options. I watched my mother follow Tyler toward the dress section, discussing fabric weights and color palettes with the enthusiasm she usually reserved for organizing medical appointments. 6 months ago, she wouldn't have been able to say gay wedding without her voice catching. Now she was consulting Pinterest boards and coordinating outfits. Emma said quietly, standing beside me near a display of bow ties. She's really trying. It's surreal. Good surreal or concerning surreal? I considered that while Tyler pulled dresses for Rebecca to try on. Good surreal, I think. She seems genuinely happy to be involved. She is. She told me this is the most excited she's been about since Dad died. Emma found a navy blue dress that complemented her coloring and didn't require complicated undergarments. Rebecca tried on 4 different options before settling on a sage green ensemble that Tyler declared absolutely perfect for your skin tone and the natural setting. What about you? Rebecca asked. Have you and Marcus finalized your attire? Simple suits, nothing fancy. We want to look like ourselves, not like we're playing dress up. Smart choice. Your father wore his best work shirt to our wedding, said he wanted to marry me as himself, not as someone he was pretending to be. Tyler was showing Emma accessories when Rebecca's phone rang. She glanced at the screen, frowned, and answered with the cautious tone she used for unexpected calls. Hello? Yes, this is Rebecca Morrison. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern. When did this happen? Is he all right? Emma and I exchanged glances. Rebecca's side of the conversation consisted mostly of yes and I understand and we'll be there as soon as possible. What's wrong? I asked when she hung up. That was Jennifer, Marcus's mother. Marcus was in an accident at work this morning. He's at Providence Hospital. The boutique suddenly felt too bright, too cheerful for the gravity of what Rebecca had just said. I pulled out my phone to call Marcus, but it went straight to voicemail. What kind of accident? Emma asked. Something with a patient. a fall, equipment malfunction. Jennifer wasn't sure the details. She just said he was conscious but hurt and they were running tests. Tyler, who had been pretending not to listen, stepped forward with the kind of professional sympathy that comes from working with people during emotional moments. "We can finish this another time. Go take care of your family."
The drive to Providence took 23 minutes through Saturday afternoon traffic. Rebecca sat in the passenger seat of my car, giving directions and making phone calls to coordinate information. She'd shifted into crisis management mode, the same focused efficiency she'd displayed during Dad's heart attack and her own kidney failure. Jennifer said he was helping transfer a teenage patient when the equipment malfunctioned, she reported, after talking to Marcus's mother again. Possible concussion, definitely some bruised ribs. They're doing a CT scan to rule out internal bleeding. Providence Hospital felt different from HSU, smaller, busier, with less of the academic medical center atmosphere and more of the community hospital urgency. We found Jennifer in the emergency department waiting area, still wearing scrubs from her morning shift at the rehabilitation center. She hugged me immediately, then Emma, then surprised everyone by hugging Rebecca too. "Any updates?" I asked. "Doctor said the CT scan looks good, no brain bleeding, no internal injuries, but they want to keep him overnight for observation because of the head injury." "Can I see him?" "Room 7. He's been asking for you." Marcus was awake when I entered his room, propped up in bed with a bandage across his forehead and the kind of careful stillness that suggests significant pain. His left eye was swollen shut, and there were abrasions on his hands from where he'd tried to break his fall. "You look terrible," I said. "Feel worse." His voice was hoarse, probably from the intubation they'd used during the CT scan. "Sorry to ruin dress shopping." "How did you know about dress shopping?" "Your mom texted me pictures. She was very excited about finding the perfect mother of the groom outfit." I sat down in the chair beside his bed, the same green vinyl model that seemed to populate every hospital room in Portland. "What happened?" "Patient transfer went wrong. Hydraulic lift malfunctioned while we were moving a kid from his wheelchair to the examination table. I got caught between the machinery and the wall. Could have been worse. Could have been better. Doctor said I'll be fine, but no work for 2 weeks. No heavy lifting for a month." "What about the wedding? It's in 3 weeks." Marcus managed a lopsided smile. "I'll be there. Might have some creative bruising in the photos, but I'll be there." Rebecca knocked on the doorframe before entering, carrying coffee for everyone and the kind of hospital navigation skills that come from recent personal experience. "How are you feeling, Marcus?" "Like I got hit by medical equipment." "That's specific." She handed him a cup of ice chips. "I've been talking to your mother about discharge planning. You'll need someone to monitor you for the next 24 hours because of the head injury." "I can do that," I said. "Actually," Rebecca continued, "I was thinking you both could stay at my house. I have a guest room on the first floor, so Marcus won't have to navigate stairs, and I'll be there if anything concerning happens overnight." The offer hung in the air like a bridge I wasn't sure how to cross. Rebecca's house had been off limits for 18 months, a space that represented everything we'd lost and couldn't repair. Now she was inviting us to recover there, offering care instead of judgment. "Mom, you don't have to." "I want to. I know my way around post-surgical recovery. And honestly, I'd feel better knowing I could help instead of just worrying from a distance." Marcus looked at me, a question in his unswollen eye. I thought about the practical considerations, my apartment's steep stairs, the distance from downtown medical care, the fact that Rebecca actually did have experience managing medical crises. "Okay," I said, "if Marcus is comfortable with it." "I'm comfortable with it. Your mom makes excellent soup." "That's settled then." Rebecca pulled out her phone and began making the kind of organized lists that had characterized her approach to every family emergency. "I'll pick up his prescriptions while you handle discharge paperwork. We'll stop by your apartment so you can pack overnight bags." 2 hours later, we were driving through the Laurelhurst neighborhood where I'd grown up,
past elementary schools and corner coffee shops that looked exactly the same as they had when I was 12. Rebecca's house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees that were just beginning to leaf out in the spring sunshine. I hadn't been inside for 18 months, but everything looked familiar and smaller than I remembered. The same beige carpet, the same family photos on the mantelpiece, the same careful organization that had defined my childhood home. Except now there were new additions: a pile of wedding planning magazines on the coffee table, printed emails about caterers and photographers, evidence that our reconciliation had become part of the landscape. "Guest rooms down the hall," Rebecca said, leading us past the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals as a child. "Fresh sheets, extra pillows. Marcus, the doctor said to wake someone if you experience nausea, dizziness, or confusion." "I'll monitor him," I said. "We'll monitor him. I'll take the night shift. You can handle the morning."
That evening, Rebecca made soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, comfort food that required no chewing for Marcus's tender jaw. We ate at the kitchen table where I'd done homework for 12 years, the same wooden surface where she'd helped me with math problems and reviewed permission slips for field trips. "This is strange," I said. "Good strange or bad strange?" Rebecca asked. "I'm not sure yet." "It's good strange," Marcus said through swollen lips. "Your family taking care of each other. That's how it's supposed to work." Later, after Marcus had fallen asleep in the guest room, Rebecca and I sat in her living room drinking tea and watching the news. The same evening routine we'd shared when I was in high school, except now we were adults with medical histories and wedding plans and the complicated understanding that family relationships require constant maintenance. "Thank you," I said, "for today, for taking care of him. He's going to be my son-in-law. This is what families do. Even when the family is complicated? Especially then." Rebecca set down her teacup and looked directly at me. "David, I need you to know something. Having you both here, taking care of Marcus, being included in wedding planning, this is the happiest I've been since your father died." "Really?" "Really. I forgot what it felt like to be useful instead of just angry, to contribute instead of just criticize." Outside, rain began falling against the windows, the gentle April precipitation that would turn Portland green again after the long winter. In 3 weeks, Marcus and I would be married in that spring landscape, surrounded by a family who had learned to love each other despite everything that had tried to keep us apart. "Get some sleep," Rebecca said. "I'll check on Marcus every few hours." I kissed her goodnight, a gesture that felt both familiar and revolutionary, then headed down the hallway to the guest room where Marcus was sleeping peacefully in the house where I'd grown up. Tomorrow, we'd return to our apartment and our regular routines, but tonight we were home in a way that felt both ancient and newly discovered.